So this video is going to be all about Alpha Direct, the different weights, how to layer it, as well as the history. Let's get right into it. So Polartec originally designed Alpha and Alpha Direct for the US Special Forces because they needed a fabric that was both really breathable for dynamic use, but it also needed to trap heat for static use. This is where this Alpha Direct comes from. It's a trickle down from the military, and backpackers took it because they realized just how appropriate it is for their stop-start use. So how does this Alpha Direct actually work? Well, if we get a close-up of this Alpha Direct hoodie, you can see the light is going through it. That's because it is basically just a mesh with polyester fibers attached to it. So air will very easily go through it, disrupting all of the heat that has been accumulating on your body. But then if there's no air movement, it'll trap a lot of that heat, and that heat is what will keep you warm. So Alpha Direct is made of polyester. What this means is it's not going to hold on to much weight from water at all. So all of the moisture from your sweat is going to accumulate and then get pushed through this material and then just straight evaporate instead of getting sucked in and holding onto it like what a merino would. And what this means is that you're going to get rid of all of that moisture a lot more. And then after you finish like a big hill climb or whatever, you're not going to have that weird clammy feeling. It's going to evaporate a lot faster. Okay, so there's three main weights when we're talking about Alpha Direct. You've got Alpha Direct 60, you've got Alpha Direct 90, and then you've got the heavyweight Alpha Direct 120. Now what this means is the amount of grams this material takes up per square meter. So this is 60 grams per square meter. This is my crew neck, I think it's by Senchi. You can see the light coming through it. This thing weighs 100 grams. It is actually so light. I would be reserving this mostly for your 3-season camping. It is the lightest, it is the least warm, but to be honest, this is the one I wear maybe 70% of the time. I really enjoy this because you may not think that these are that warm because of the weight and how airy it is, but with the amount of air that these things actually trap, especially when you've got a shell over the top, these things are very, very warm. Now this here is Alpha Direct 90. I have Alpha Direct 90 pants. I don't have a shirt just because the 60 and 120 does enough, but this is the 90. You can kind of see that it's not as transparent as the 60. It is warmer, but it is also a bit heavier. So this one weighs 100 grams, this one weighs 130, and for comparison, the MacPack Nitro Fleece hoodie weighs 140 grams, so 40 grams more than this. I would recommend the 90 weight as the best all-round material. I feel like this material is the best balance between weight and warmth. Okay, so here we have my favorite. This is the 120 weight. This is the fleece that I use when I'm at camp. I don't really use this for dynamic use or when I'm hiking just because it is so warm. But it is, what, 180 grams, I think it is. And the amount of air that this thing traps, you can go well into freezing with this sort of weight. As you can see, there's very little sunlight that's coming through this weight, and that's just because there's so much polyester fibers here. But what this does is just trap so much warmth. So that's what I'd be using it for. The 60 and 90 I'd be using for your static and dynamic movement, but this 120 and up, I'd be using it mostly just for static at camp use. Have you heard of the movie Shrek? Because I'm basing my clothing on layers. Okay, so Alpha Direct's greatest strength is also its greatest weakness, and that is air permeability. The fact that air can just come straight through and disrupt all of your warmth that you've generated, you can use that to your advantage. So right now it's about 22 degrees and all I am wearing is this Alpha Direct fleece, but because there's a light breeze, I'm actually quite well regulated. You need to be able to understand how this works to make the full benefit of Alpha Direct. Now there are two main pieces of clothing that you're going to be pairing with this. The first is going to be your sun hoodie. So with your sun hoodie, you can wear it over the top of your fleece. Now I like to do this in the early morning when it is pretty frigid. What this will allow is a little bit of wind resistance from your sun hoodie, and it'll trap a little bit more of your heat. Now, if it isn't as cold, you can put your Alpha Direct over the top of this. It will do basically the same thing, but it's just not going to be as warm. You may also want to do it this way as well if you're going to be doing a bit of bushwhacking, because this fabric, what's going to happen is it'll catch on literally anything and just pull it to shreds. So if you're doing any sort of bushwhacking, I would recommend always have it as not the most outer layer. Now the next layer that I would be recommending you have on you with your Alpha Direct is your wind shell. This thing does allow a little bit of air to come through, but it is also not waterproof. So I'd be wearing this about 75% of the time over a rain jacket, just because it does still allow air to go through. So you're still regulating your heat quite a bit. Now I would 100% be recommending, in the same shopping cart that you're buying your fleece, you should also have one of these, because they just pair so well. What this allows is anytime there's a breeze, it's just going to help trap all of that heat inside, but not so much that you're going to over sweat and become like a furnace. So I would be saying that if you're going hiking anywhere, if you have a Alpha Direct top, you should also be having a wind shell as well. This is the Mountain Hardwear air shell, but I would also recommend the Patagonia Houdini. Both of these are really good packable, lightweight wind shells. They provide some rain resistance, but they're mostly just designed for blocking that wind and trapping all of that heat inside. You're going to have so much air just trapped in here, generating that warmth. But as soon as you start heating up, you can unzip it and you're going to dump all of that heat as well. So when we're talking about base layers and pairing this with Alpha Direct, I would say merino can work for static use when you're at camp. This does provide a lot of warmth, and the pros are that it doesn't get stinky, and that it's so warm. It's ridiculously warm. But the trouble is that it holds onto water and holds onto moisture. So I would not be wearing a merino base layer underneath this while hiking, because it kind of just defeats the purpose. You've got this on, it's holding onto water, but this is just designed to push all of that water out. What I would be recommending instead of a tight knit base layer, either polyester or merino, is more of a mesh one. So let's look at that. Okay, so the base layer that I would be recommending is a mesh base layer. This is it here. It looks very strange. I know it's very holey. At first you're wondering how on earth does this work at all to insulate. We'll get into that in a second, but I would be using this mostly for when it's quite cold. For when just the fleece isn't enough, you can chuck this on and then put your sun hoodie or shell over the top. And this is just going to provide that extra layer of insulation. It's going to create more air pockets to insulate you and keep you warm as you're moving. This also does work quite well as a static insulator, so I'll wear this as my base layer when I'm back at camp sleeping and stuff as well. So let's get into exactly how this works. So the thick mesh base layers create a physical 3D space between your skin and your clothes, and this creates an air moat which prevents the wet, sweaty fabric from actually touching your body. Unlike these solid base layers that wick this liquid, the huge holes in the mesh allow sweat to evaporate into vapor and escape instantly, removing that clammy feeling. So as you move, the mesh pumps warm, moist air out. When you stop and layer over it, those same holes trap the dead air, providing a massive insulation for almost zero weight. Now, the Brynje Super Thermo uses plastic that literally cannot absorb water, so it stays dry even when you're redlining up a climb. So when we're thinking about warmth and actually staying warm, especially in cold conditions, what keeps you warm is not the fabric itself, it's the air that is trapped between the fabric. So this is why the Alpha Direct and mesh base layers work so well together. Because they have so much space for air to be trapped, it actually holds on to significantly more air than other fleeces and other base layers. So all you really need to do is chuck on a shell, chuck on another insulation layer like a down fleece sweater or something like that, or even just your air shell, and that's going to trap all of that air and keep you significantly warmer for a lot less weight. Okay, so we've talked about Alpha Direct a lot for the waist up, but I want to talk about some of the more underrated features now that I use Alpha Direct for. In terms of hiking in winter with lots of ice and snow and in alpine conditions, I really like layering it under a shell for your pants. So what you'll do is you'll have some sort of rain pant or shell with a full zip or a really long zip, and then you'll have your Alpha Direct layer in here. Now what this allows is the membrane will breathe quite well, but then this also allows lots of ventilation and warmth to be trapped in. So you can zip and unzip as you need, but then you can also trap a lot of heat in for when it is actually really cold. I really like this layer. I've been using this combination without soft shell, without regular pants, just this combination in winter, in snow, in really wet and cold conditions, basically exclusively. I just find that it works so well. So when you're in Australia, it's actually pretty hard to source some of this stuff. When you're in America, and I think in Europe as well, you've got cottage companies on every corner making fleeces and everything out of Alpha Direct. But in Australia, it's pretty hard. I would suggest that there's two main ways that you can find Alpha Direct. The first is I would recommend Zero G Gear. This guy is a cottage company based in New South Wales, Australia, and he makes these pants that I've been using, and he also makes a hoodie as well. They're on the more expensive side, but that's just the same with anything that you buy that's Alpha Direct. But it is good that you're supporting a handmade local cottage gear company in Australia. I highly recommend Zero G Gear. I think the guy's name is Tielo, and he's just an all-round great guy. The second is MacPack, actually. MacPack make their Nitro Fleece. It's around the same price that what Tielo makes it for. They also do a kind of hybrid one where it's like a shell and Alpha Direct in one. I would recommend just getting the actual Nitro Fleece. You can get it on sale sometimes too, but they're the two main ways that I would be sourcing Alpha Direct in Australia. You can buy from cottage manufacturers in America and ship it over. It's just going to be a bit more expensive. Durability can be a bit of an issue with this, so what I would recommend is if you're doing any sort of bushwhacking, have a shell or some sort of fabric over the top to stop it snagging, and just be very careful with any sort of Velcro. Velcro is going to pull apart all of the piles, and it's just going to be a bit of a bad time. When you're washing it, always try and put it into some sort of bag like this, and you're going to wash it with cold water, and don't do any fabric softener. That's basically all you need to do, and it'll last quite a while. So to finish off this video, what I would recommend is if you're just starting out with Alpha Direct, pick up an Alpha 90 fleece, and then also pick up some sort of cheap wind shell. You could pick up the Patagonia Houdini. You could even find some at Uniqlo and shops like that, and you're already halfway there. And then you can just play around, use them in different scenarios, and you can see what works and what doesn't work. Cool. Thanks, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.